They say trust is the foundation of any relationship, and for the longest time I believed that, with every fiber of my being. I built my life on that principle. My marriage to Mark felt like the most solid structure I had ever known. We shared dreams, secrets, laughter, and the quiet comfort of just being together. We planned a future I saw stretching out bright and clear before us. We talked about kids, about retirement by the beach, about growing old and wrinkling together. Trust wasn't just a word. It was the air I breathed in our shared world. But trust, I learned, is also the most fragile thing. A single crack, a whisper of doubt, and the whole edifice can crumble, leaving you standing in the rubble, wondering how you could have been so blind. My story is about that crumbling, about the woman who caused it, and about the day karma finally collected its debt. It started subtly, so subtly I almost dismissed it. Mark, usually so present, so here when he was home, began to drift away. His eyes, once so focused on me, would flick to his phone. His laughter felt a little forced sometimes. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away with urgent projects and impending deadlines. At first, I understood. Work was demanding. We were both professionals with demanding careers. I was a marketing manager at a growing tech company, and Mark was an engineer at a firm specializing in civil infrastructure. We were a power couple, or so I thought. The first real prickle of suspicion came when I noticed his phone was constantly with him, in the bathroom, in the kitchen while he made coffee, even taking it to bed. He'd never been like that. He used to leave it charging downstairs without a second thought. Now, it was glued to his hand, screen facing down. If I walked into the room while he was on it, he'd quickly swipe away, a casual explanation about emails or news articles ready on his lips. But the quickness, the slight tension in his shoulders, didn't match the casual tone. Then there were the credit card statements, small, unfamiliar charges. A coffee shop near his office I'd never heard him mention. A lunch bill for 2 at a restaurant he said he ate at alone. Nothing huge, nothing that screamed affair immediately, but enough to plant a tiny seed of unease. A seed that, once planted, began to sprout in the fertile ground of my growing suspicion. I hated myself for it, but I started watching him. Not in a paranoid stalking way, but with a heightened awareness. I paid attention to his body language, the nuances in his voice. The little inconsistencies began to pile up. He'd say he was meeting a client for dinner, but his shirt wouldn't smell like restaurant food, or he'd come home too early for a full dinner meeting. He'd mention traffic being bad from one direction when I knew his office was the other way. The turning point came one Tuesday night. He said he was working late on a critical proposal. Around 9 p.m., I decided to bring him some food. I drove to his office building. His car was in the parking lot. I walked in, my heart a little fluttery with the thought of surprising him. His office door was ajar. I pushed it open, a smile on my face, a container of his favorite pasta in my hand. He wasn't alone. He was standing by the window, talking softly on his phone, his back to the door. And sitting on the edge of his desk, facing him, was a woman. She had long, dark hair and was laughing at something he was saying, her head tilted back. It was the kind of intimate, easy laughter that spoke of comfort and familiarity. My smile froze. My stomach plummeted. I knew with a sickening certainty, in that single horrifying moment, I must have made a sound, a gasp or a dropped plate. I honestly don't remember. But Mark spun around, his eyes widening in shock, guilt, flashing across his face before he could mask it. The woman froze, her laughter dying on her lips, her eyes flicking to me, then back to him. The container of pasta slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the carpeted floor with a splat. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the air, a grotesque, parody of the domestic comfort I had been trying to bring him. "Sarah," Mark said, his voice strained, "this is my wife, Emily." The woman, Sarah, offered a weak, awkward smile. "Hi, Emily. I'm Sarah Johnson." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, the scene burning itself into my memory. The shared glance between them, the immediate tension, the shattered pieces of my perfect life lying on the floor like the pasta. Mark stammered something about Sarah helping him finish up, that she was just leaving. Sarah quickly gathered her things, mumbling another apology, and practically fled the office. Mark walked towards me, his hands outstretched, but I flinched away. "Emily, let me explain." "Explain what, Mark?" My voice was a whisper, fragile as spun glass. "Explain why there's a woman in your office at 9 p.m. looking at you like that." He didn't have a good answer. Not then. Not really. He tried to downplay it, to make it seem innocent. A colleague, working late, standard stuff. But the lie was as transparent as cellophane. I left the office, leaving the spilled pasta and my shattered heart behind. The drive home was a blur of tears and disbelief. My mind raced, replaying every strange look, every late night, every questionable charge. It all clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of deception. I barely slept. The next morning, I woke up with a steely resolve that surprised even myself. The pain was still there, a raw, gaping wound, but beneath it was a cold fury. I wasn't going to let him lie to me anymore. I deserved the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. I accessed his phone records through our shared account. There it was, a number called and texted dozens of times a day, always the same one. I cross-referenced it. It was Sarah Johnson's number. I found emails between them, buried in a separate folder he thought I wouldn't find. They weren't overtly romantic, but the tone was intimate, familiar. Pet names, inside jokes, plans to work late, followed by smiley faces. The knife twisted deeper with each discovery. Armed with this, I confronted him again, this time in our living room, the space that had once felt like our sanctuary. He came home that evening looking tired and apprehensive. He knew this wasn't over. "Mark," I started, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was raging inside me. "We need to talk. Really talk. No more lies." He sat down slowly, his eyes avoiding mine. "Okay, Emily." I laid out the phone records, the emails. I showed him the credit card statements. "Explain this, Mark." He finally cracked. The carefully constructed facade crumbled. Tears welled up in his eyes. Tears I had no sympathy for. He admitted it. The affair with Sarah. It had been going on for 6 months. 6 months of lies, of sneaking around, of betraying everything we had built. The confession was a brutal blow, but it wasn't the knockout punch. That came next. He buried his face in his hands. "Emily, there's something else." My heart hammered against my ribs. What else could there possibly be? Was there someone else too? "What?" I demanded, my voice sharp. He looked up, his face a mask of misery and confusion. "She's pregnant, Emily." The world stopped spinning. The air left my lungs. Pregnant. Sarah Johnson, the woman who had been laughing on his desk, was pregnant with his child. It was a new level of betrayal, a depth I hadn't imagined. It wasn't just an affair. It was a potential family being built on the ruins of mine. I don't remember exactly what happened next. I think I screamed. I know I cried, a raw, guttural sound of pure pain. I yelled at him, words I didn't know I had in me. Accusations, heartbreak, anger all spilled out. How could he? How dare he? Not only cheat, but potentially bring a child into this mess, a child conceived in deception? He tried to explain, to justify. He talked about feeling disconnected from me. A lie, a cruel deflection. He talked about Sarah being understanding, about her making him feel seen. More lies, more excuses. He talked about the pregnancy being unexpected, about being scared and confused. Scared? Confused? What about me? I was standing in the wreckage of my life, blindsided, devastated. His fear and confusion were self-inflicted. Mine were the result of his cruel actions. He begged for forgiveness, for a chance to fix things. But the word pregnant echoed in the space between us, a barrier, impossible to cross. How could we possibly recover from this? A child changes everything. It binds people together, even people who shouldn't be together. And this child, if it was real, would forever be a living reminder of his betrayal. I told him to leave, to get out, to go to her. I couldn't look at him, couldn't breathe the same air. He packed a bag quickly, his movements jerky, his face a picture of despair. As he walked out the door, carrying his suitcase and the weight of his lies, I felt an emptiness so profound it was physical. Our home, the place we had built together, suddenly felt cold, hollow, and alien. In the days that followed, I was a zombie. I went through the motions of living, but I wasn't truly present. The pain was a constant companion, a heavy weight in my chest. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support, listening patiently to my tearful, often incoherent ramblings. Through mutual friends and discreet inquiries, I learned more about Sarah Johnson. She was relatively new to Mark's company, ambitious, and known for being a bit calculating. People said she was eager to climb the corporate ladder, always looking for an angle. This profile fit the woman who had inserted herself into my marriage. The pregnancy, I learned from a colleague of Mark's who was also a casual acquaintance of Sarah's, had been announced rather dramatically at the office just a few weeks before. I discovered the affair. Sarah had been very public about it, talking about her unexpected blessing, and how supportive the father was being, though she hadn't named him publicly at first. The timing was suspicious, right around the time Mark started getting even more secretive. It felt less like an unexpected blessing and more like a strategic move. As I pieced together the timeline, a new, chilling thought began to form. What if the pregnancy wasn't real? What if it was another lie, a manipulation to force Mark's hand, to make him leave me for her? It seemed too cruel, too twisted to be true. But the more I thought about it, the more plausible it felt. Sarah's ambition, the dramatic announcement, the timing, it all fit a pattern of manipulation. I started digging deeper, this time focusing on Sarah. It wasn't easy. I couldn't just ask her for medical records, but I could look for inconsistencies in her story, clues that she might be faking it. I followed her on social media, from a burner account, of course. Her posts were vague, often focused on her, journey and changes, but there were no ultrasound pictures, no baby bump photos that progressed naturally over time. She always wore loose clothing in pictures. She talked about morning sickness, but mutual acquaintances mentioned she never seemed sick at work or at company events. I contacted the friend of Mark's who knew Sarah. Let's call him David. David was a good guy, slightly uncomfortable being in the middle, but he felt bad for me. He confirmed Sarah had been very vocal about the pregnancy at work. She even talked about due dates, doctor's appointments. But, David said, he'd never actually seen her looking pregnant, and she always seemed to avoid having her photo taken, from certain angles at company gatherings. My suspicion solidified into a grim certainty. She was faking it. The thought was horrifying, but also, strangely, empowering. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about a deliberate, cruel deception, not just against me, but against Mark too. She had used a fake pregnancy, the promise of a child, to break up my marriage and trap him. The fury returned, hotter and sharper than before. But this time, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was righteous indignation. She wouldn't get away with this, not if I could help it. My focus shifted from grieving the loss of my marriage to planning my counterattack. I needed proof, irrefutable proof, that Sarah Johnson was not pregnant. And I needed to expose her, not just to Mark, but to everyone she had lied to, everyone she had manipulated. I hired a divorce lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright. I explained the situation, the affair, the alleged pregnancy, and my strong suspicion that the pregnancy was a lie. She listened intently, her expression grim. "Faking a pregnancy isn't illegal in itself, Ms. Peterson," she explained, leaning back in her chair. "But it can certainly impact the divorce proceedings, especially if it was used to manipulate your husband and influence his decisions regarding your marriage and potential settlement." We discussed the assets. Our house, valued at around $550,000, was jointly owned. We had joint savings and investment accounts totaling about $120,000. Mark's salary was around $160,000 a year. Mine was $130,000. Ms. Albright advised me on the typical outcomes in our state, aiming for a fair division, but also suggesting that evidence of Sarah's deception could potentially sway a judge in my favor, perhaps leading to a larger share of the assets or spousal support for a period, citing the emotional distress caused by the elaborate lie. "Your priority now," she said, "is gathering concrete evidence about the non-pregnancy. Can you think of anyone who might know the truth? A close friend of hers? A former roommate? Someone she might have confided in before starting this charade?" I thought about David, the colleague who suspected things. I also thought about some of Sarah's old social media posts I had dug up from before she joined Mark's company. She had a group of friends she seemed close to then, but they were noticeably absent from her recent posts, which focused more on work events and vague, aspirational quotes. Had she fallen out with them? Maybe they knew something. It took some discreet online searching, but I found one of her former friends on LinkedIn. Let's call her Jessica. Jessica had posted a picture of them together a couple of years ago, referring to Sarah as her bestie. I took a chance and sent Jessica a message, introducing myself vaguely as someone who knew Sarah from a different context and had a sensitive question. To my surprise, Jessica responded. We arranged to talk on the phone. I was nervous, unsure how much to reveal. I started cautiously, mentioning I was going through a difficult time due to my husband's affair with Sarah and a complicated situation involving a rumored pregnancy. Jessica went quiet for a moment. Then, she sighed. "Sarah and we had a falling out, a bad one. Honestly, she can be a lot. Very focused on getting what she wants, no matter who she hurts." I took a deep breath. "Jessica, this is difficult to ask, but do you know anything about her pregnancy? Is it real?" There was another pause. Then Jessica's voice dropped, filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "No, it's not real. She told me about it months ago, before she even started talking about the father publicly. She said she was going to fake it. She wanted to secure her future with some guy at work she was seeing. I told her she was crazy, that it was a horrible idea. We argued about it, and we haven't really spoken since." My heart hammered. It was true. She wasn't pregnant. Jessica's confession was the key I needed. "Jessica," I said, my voice trembling slightly, Would you be willing to help me? To tell Mark? To tell others? This lie has destroyed my marriage." Jessica was hesitant at first. She didn't want to get involved in drama. But I explained the depth of the lie, how it wasn't just a harmless fib, but a deliberate act of manipulation that had caused immense pain. I appealed to her sense of right and wrong. Finally, reluctantly, she agreed. She would be willing to tell Mark what she knew, and if necessary, provide a written statement. Having Jessica's confirmation was a massive step, but I wanted something more, something undeniable for the public exposure I was planning. Jessica's testimony was powerful, but Sarah could try to discredit her, claim she was a jilted friend. I needed physical evidence. I did more digging. I looked into Sarah's past social media, old forum posts, anything I could find. I discovered she had a history of exaggeration and fabricating stories to get attention or sympathy. It painted a clear picture of a manipulative personality. Then, I found something else. A post on a lesser-known forum for aspiring actors. Sarah, under a different username, was asking for advice on method acting a physical condition. The timing of the posts aligned with when she would have been starting to show. She was asking about padding, posture, and how to convincingly portray pregnancy symptoms. It was a smoking gun, albeit a circumstantial one. I continued to build my case, documenting everything: emails, phone records, social media posts, Jessica's contact information, screenshots of the forum posts. Ms. Albright advised me on the best way to present this evidence. The plan for the exposure began to take shape. It needed to be public, where Sarah couldn't deny it, where her lies would be revealed to the people she had been deceiving. Mark's company was having its annual summer gala in 2 weeks. It was a semi-formal event, attended by employees, their spouses, and key clients. Mark and Sarah would be there, undoubtedly playing the part of a couple looking forward to parenthood. It was the perfect stage. I debated whether I should even go. The thought of seeing Mark and Sarah together, in public, presenting a united front built on lies, made me sick. But this was my chance. My chance for justice, for vindication. I decided to attend. I bought a stunning dress, something that made me feel strong and beautiful, not like the broken woman I had been for months. I arranged for Jessica to be there as well, inviting her as my guest. She was nervous, but determined to help. The night of the gala arrived. The event was held at a swanky hotel ballroom downtown. As I walked in, Jessica by my side, I felt a knot of anxiety and adrenaline twist in my stomach. The room was filled with people, a hum of conversation and laughter. My eyes scanned the crowd, searching. There they were, Mark and Sarah, standing near the bar, talking to a group of colleagues. Sarah was wearing a flowy dress, strategically hiding her lack of a bump. She had that familiar performative smile on her face. Mark looked tired. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good. Let him feel the weight of his choices. I took a deep breath. This was it. I steered Jessica towards them, my heart pounding. As we approached, Mark saw me. His eyes widened in surprise and something like fear. Sarah followed his gaze, her smile faltering when she saw me. The cheerful conversation around them died down slightly as people noticed the tension. "Emily," Mark said, his voice low. "A warning, perhaps." "Mark," I replied, my voice steady, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. I turned, my attention to Sarah. "Sarah, it's good to see you." She forced a smile. "Emily, I wasn't expecting you here." "Oh, I wouldn't miss it," I said, a hint of steel in my voice. "Especially not with such exciting news circulating." I gestured vaguely towards her midsection. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her stomach. "Yes. Well, we're very happy." "Are you?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. "Because I've been doing some thinking about the timing of this exciting news, about the suddenness of it, and about some other things I've learned." The air around us grew thick with tension. People nearby were now openly watching, their conversations silenced. Emily, what are you doing? Mark whispered, his face pale. I'm revealing the truth, Mark, I said, my voice clear and strong, loud enough for those around us to hear. The truth about Sarah's little secret. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, a flicker of panic crossing her face. I don't know what you're talking about, Emily. Oh, I think you do, I countered. You see, I know you're not pregnant, Sarah. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Mark stared at me, stunned. Sarah's face went white. That's a cruel lie, Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking. How dare you? It's not a lie, I said calmly. Unlike yours. I turned to the people watching. Sarah Johnson has been faking her pregnancy to manipulate Mark, to break up our marriage, and to secure her position. She isn't carrying a child. Sarah started to protest loudly, but I cut her off. Jessica, would you care to share what you know? I prompted, turning to my friend. Jessica stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly. Her voice was nervous but firm. I've known Sarah for years. She told me months ago, before any of this, that she was planning to fake a pregnancy to get the attention of a man she liked at work. I tried to talk her out of it. She is not pregnant. More gasps. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Sarah looked like a cornered animal, her eyes wide with fear and fury. She's lying, Sarah screamed, pointing at Jessica. They're both lying. This is a pathetic attempt to get back at Mark because he left her. Is it? I challenged, pulling out my phone. I had transferred the audio recording Jessica had secretly managed to get of Sarah admitting her plan, just in case. It wasn't a confession of the current fake pregnancy, but of her plan to fake one with a colleague, which strongly corroborated Jessica's testimony and painted a clear picture of her character and intentions. I played a short snippet, Sarah's, voice clearly audible, discussing her scheme. The snippet was short, but devastating. Sarah's face crumpled. Mark stared at the phone in my hand, his mouth slightly open. He looked utterly bewildered, betrayed. And if that's not enough, I continued, my voice unwavering, I have evidence of Sarah researching how to fake a pregnancy, asking about padding and acting techniques, right around the time she claims she would have been showing. I didn't show the forum posts publicly, but the implication was clear, and the weight of evidence was mounting. The room was silent, except for the murmur of shocked voices. All eyes were on Sarah, then on Mark. Sarah let out a choked sob and pushed past the people, attempting to flee the ballroom. But she didn't get far. Her boss, the CEO of the company, who had been standing nearby and had heard everything, stepped forward, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Sarah, he said, his voice cold and authoritative. I think we need to have a conversation, immediately. 2 security guards, alerted by the commotion, moved towards Sarah. She was effectively trapped. Mark just stood there, staring at me, then at Sarah, then back at me. The color had drained from his face. The reality of the situation, the depth of Sarah's deception and his own foolishness seemed to hit him all at once. The justice wasn't a sudden, explosive act. It was a slow, unfolding spectacle of humiliation and exposure. Watching Sarah, the woman who had stolen my husband and used a cruel lie about motherhood to do it, stand there, exposed and disgraced in front of her colleagues and peers, was a bitter but undeniably sweet moment of vindication. Her carefully constructed facade, built on lies and manipulation, had shattered. The fallout was swift and decisive. Sarah was escorted out of the gala by security, her career at Mark's company effectively over. The next day, an internal investigation was launched. Her web of lies unraveled completely. Other instances of her manipulative behavior came to light. She became a pariah, her reputation in their industry irrevocably damaged. As for Mark, he was mortified. The shame was palpable. He reached out to me repeatedly in the days and weeks that followed, begging for forgiveness, expressing his disgust at Sarah's deception and his regret for his own actions. He finally saw her for who she was, a manipulator who had played him, as much as she had hurt me. But the damage was done. While I had a brief flicker of satisfaction in seeing him realize the truth, the betrayal ran too deep. The trust was broken beyond repair. We proceeded with the divorce. The exposure at the gala and the subsequent confirmation of Sarah's elaborate lie did, as Ms. Albright predicted, influence the settlement. The judge, seeing the evidence of Sarah's malicious deception and the emotional distress it had caused, was sympathetic. The divorce was finalized a few months later. I was awarded the house, free and clear, valued at $550,000. I also received a significant portion of our joint savings and investments, totaling $90,000, and spousal support for 5 years, allowing me financial stability as I rebuilt my life. While it wasn't about the money, the favorable settlement felt like a small measure of compensation for the pain I had endured. Mark faced his own consequences. His reputation at work was damaged, though he wasn't fired. He was demoted, and his career trajectory stalled. Socially, he was shunned by many colleagues and acquaintances who were disgusted by his affair and his gullibility in falling for Sarah's lie. He lost friends, respect, and the future he thought he was building with Sarah. He was left with the ruins of his own making. Sarah, I heard, left the state shortly after losing her job. She tried to find work in a similar field, but her reputation followed her. Her attempts to re-enter the professional world were met with cold shoulders and closed doors. The consequences of her lies extended far beyond her immediate goal of capturing Mark. They had effectively derailed her life. My journey to healing was long and arduous. The scars of betrayal remain, a reminder of the fragility of trust. There are still days when the pain resurfaces, a sharp, unexpected ache. But the constant, gnawing doubt that consumed me before the truth came out is gone. The uncertainty, the feeling of being crazy for suspecting, has been replaced by a quiet certainty. I was right, she lied, and she paid a price. Seeing Sarah exposed, stripped of her deceit, and facing the consequences of her actions wasn't a magical cure for my heartbreak, but it was a powerful moment of catharsis. It was seeing the universe, in its own slow, often messy way, balance the scales. It was the sweet, albeit complicated taste of karma served. My life is different now. It's not the future I had planned, not the one I had so carefully built with Mark. But it's mine. I am stronger, more resilient, and fiercely protective of my peace. I learned a hard lesson about trust, but I also learned about my own strength, my ability to confront difficult truths, and the power of seeking justice, not just for myself, but against those who would use deception to destroy others. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, is now my sanctuary, a space where I am rebuilding my life, one foundation stone at a time, on a bedrock of truth, not lies. The pasta stain is long gone, but the memory of that night and the subsequent triumph of justice is etched into my memory. And sometimes, late at night, I think about Sarah Johnson, wherever she is, and know that her lies didn't win. In the end, the truth prevailed, and karma had its sweet, undeniable revenge.